Good morning and welcome to this second of third webinar with Profit Decoder and Island Institute. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We'll be talking in just a little bit about improving your lobstering business. Just to overview, this webinar and the series are brought to you as a part of the Island Institute's Future of Fishing project, funded through a congressional direct spending earmark. And this aim is to help fishing families become more profitable, find resiliency through their business, better uh, better develop ideas around how they may be diversifying household income, trying new strategies, and overall feeling more comfortable with their financial management. We hope that's you, and we'll be recording this webinar, and it'll end up on the Island Institute's Future of Fishing Toolkit, which I will put into the chat. And with that, I'd like to introduce one of the co-founders of Profit Decoder, Jay Friedlander. Hello, Jay.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Really great to be here. Thanks everybody for joining us. And I'm here today with my co-founder Jordan Motzkin. And just a brief bit about my background. I am a professor at College of the Atlantic, but also an entrepreneur. And for the last, a long while now, have been working with folks like you from all parts of the Maine economy and really helping folks who are passionate and, living their work, helping them understand the finer points of business and doing it in a way that just makes it accessible because this stuff is incredibly important. And if you aren't taking the time to tend to your business and to your numbers, you can run into a whole lot of consequences. And, Jordan and I and Jeff and everyone here wants to help you all succeed. And today is really about, the concrete steps you can take to improve your business. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jordan.
Thanks, Jay. Like Jay, I've been involved in helping small businesses of all kinds for the last 10 years. Everything from early day startup to where you're trying to turn your first buck to growing companies to multi-million dollars in sales and then selling the business. So really excited to be with all of you here today. And so
And
I wanted to give a brief overview of sort of who we are and what we do. And so at Profit Decoder, we really try to do two things, and that's provide coaching and training, like the session you're looking at right now, as well as providing software to go along with that to make decisions much easier. And we try to really remove some of the confusion that folks often feel around their financials and make it simple. And that's what we're going to be going through with you today. So as Jay mentioned in the beginning, we've helped hundreds of small businesses, a ton of them right here in Maine, understand their profitability and then ultimately grow profitability. So everything from fishing to farming to consumer packaged goods, you name it. And so here's how the session's going to work today. We're scheduled to go for about 60 minutes. You all will be muted, but we please invite you to ask questions at any time during the chat. I promise you that if you have a question, likely somebody else tuning in also has that same question. So please feel free to write questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring it, both responding over text as well as walking through those questions out loud during the session. And we are recording this session today. So if at any time you want to revisit the topics that we're covering today, you'll be able to do so. And with that, I'll talk about the steps that we're going to cover today. So first, Jay's going to walk us through a general profitability review. Just talk about some profit basics to get us all aligned on some of the same terminology that can be confusing. He's going to talk about kind of the 4 fundamental levers that your businesses have to improve your overall profitability. We're going to show you how you can actually take a look at that for your own business within Profit Decoder and see how those changes affect your profitability. And then we're going to be taking your questions throughout the session. And then lastly, through our special partnership with the Island Institute, we're going to show you how you can get your own free Profit Decoder Pro account at the end of the webinar.
So we just really like to say thank you to Island Institute for organizing these sessions. This is the second one of three sessions that we'll be having. And thank you to Jeff and Island Institute. And as Jordan mentioned, you'll be getting details on how to get your free Profit Decoder account at the end of the webinar. And so, as you all know, times are really tough in the lobstering industry. And in, 2024, lobstermen set almost 300,000 fewer traps. And, this was coming off of the lobstering landings have dropped 10 million pounds from last year, which was already at a 15-year low. And you can see people are setting fewer traps because of a lot of reasons, fewer lobsters to catch, but also, bait, fuel, repairs, traps have all soared in price over the last few years. And this has really led to a situation that we see both in lobstering and in many small businesses where you're just sort of wandering on this financial journey, and people can really get stuck in the maze trying to get to profitability. And you have, unexpected expenses with boats and repairs. You have, variability in lobster prices, and people get caught up there or with fuel. And what we want to do today is make this journey a little bit easier where you don't have to go through this maze, and just you can kind of get directly to answers using Profit Decoder. And what we really want to do is help you understand the business without complex math, messy spreadsheets, or all of that. You can really think of Profit Decoder, if you think about this architecturally, more like a conceptual drawing. It's easy to put things in, move things around. There's not a, you don't have to invest a ton of time into understanding what something might look like. And then if you want, once you have that business model in place with Profit Decoder, you can move into a full architectural plan and really do complex spreadsheet using Excel or Google Sheets or whatever you like. Now, the session that we did prior to this, we went through Profit Decoder and did a whole business evaluation where we were looking at all the different elements of the business. And we're going to review some of that for those of you who weren't here last time, but definitely check out that webinar, which is on the Island Institute website. But today we really want to look at how can you improve profits, and in three different areas. One is evaluating your daily operations, and when does it make sense to go out or maybe stay back. We're going to assess variable cost changes because it turns out that relatively small changes may be able to have a huge impact on your business and your livelihood. And then finally, we'll examine fixed costs. Now, one note of caution as we get going here is oftentimes with financial concepts and numbers, you will feel like, oh my gosh, I've got this. This is so clear. And then you'll be like, wait, I don't get it. Please, A, reach out with questions, and B, just realize it's normal for things to be going in and out of focus. So as Jordan mentioned, I want to go over with you some profit basics. Um, and so we're going to start this by looking at the two types of costs that every business manages. Um, and so you have the cost paid with every lobster that you sell. Um, and then you have the cost paid regardless of your sales. And so these are referred to as variable costs, which go up every time you go out and catch another lobster. You can think of this like fuel or bait. They go up as you catch more. And then fixed costs that you have to pay regardless of what your sales are. So if you look at variable costs, as I mentioned, they would include things like bait, fuel, your crew wages, dealer commissions. All of those are really dependent on the amount of lobster you are catching. Whereas fixed costs, you should have to pay regardless of sales. And so for Profit Decoder, we always include your salary as part of fixed costs, even though we know that's gonna change a little bit, but we want to make sure that when you look at how much you have to catch, you're thinking about the salary that you want to make. We'd include insurance in that, maybe dockage and mooring, as well as boat and truck payments. So now I want to just show you the basics of how this works. Um, in terms of profitability, uh, and go through some language so we make sure we're talking about the same things here. So first, you sell something and you make money. You sell your lobsters, and you get money for it. But then you have a whole bunch of variable costs that come in that we've just talked about, from bait and fuel and maintenance. And so what happens is, after you pay for those variable costs, what's left over is called contribution. So I'll show you how this works. The dollar comes over here. We pay for all our variable costs, which in this case are 70 cents. And as a result, we have 30 cents in contribution left over. And then what happens is, that contribution really goes into paying off your fixed costs. And once those fixed costs are paid off, then we reach break even. So here we have our truck, and we deposit that 30 cents into the truck to help start paying it off. And again, we get $1 for selling the lobster, and that goes over to help pay for the truck. And these are the least expensive truck payments in the history of humanity, because we don't want to be here all day filling up the truck with dollars. And there we go. After four, we have broken even. And and then once you have broken even, uh, what is left over from that contribution becomes profit. And so here we can look at this. The dollar comes over. We take out what we pay in variable costs, and voila, we've made our first profit. And so here we go again with the contribution, and that money becomes profit. And and this will continue. And there we go. And so that's basically how profit works. So you have the sales, you have the contribution, what's left over after you've paid those variable costs. First, you reach break even once you've paid off all the fixed costs, and then what's left over after that is profit. But what we're really interested in today is, how can we improve those profits? And specifically, there are four levers that you can pull on uh, to improve your profits. So let's take a look at these. On the revenue side, it's a question of price. So how much are you getting for every pound of lobster that you sell, or volume, which is, how much are you catching? And then on the cost side, we really have these two types of costs that we've talked about: variable costs and fixed costs. Now, in lobstering, for the people that we talk to, we all know that price is really dependent on a number of factors that are out of your control. So when we look at how to improve profits, we're really going to be focusing on these three that are left over: volume, variable, and fixed costs. And so, what I want to do is, and we're just going to take these in turn. And so, when you're looking at volume, you really want to be focused on lobstering when it actually earns you money, because you only want to be catching more when it's improving your profits. And so now, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jordan, to take us through Profit Decoder, and show us how this can work. And Jordan will review some of the basics of entering data, and then we'll get into the lobstering when it earns.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. So, as Jay was mentioning, we're actually going to walk through our example that we were working on the last time we met. And if you weren't here last time, that's okay. I'll give you a brief overview of how this all works. Last time we met, we had been looking at an example lobster business in our scenarios inside Profit Decoder. And I'm going to scroll down to that one. We had our Island Institute lobstering business. And since we're now going to be making some changes, based on the information that Jay presented, I don't want to affect my original scenario. I want to keep those numbers as is, because that's kind of how my business is today. And now I want to look at it differently to see how it could be. So I'm going to click the duplicate button, and it's going to create a copy down below. And just to keep things nice and organized, I'm going to rename that old scenario original, so I can make sure I have my original numbers to go back to. And then I'm going to edit this copy to just say adjustment, just to keep it simple and clean. So now I'm going to go into that scenario, and let's just refresh our memory for what we did the last time we were in here. So for this lobster business, we had about $450,000 in sales annually. If you're with us for the first time, Profit Decoder makes it really easy to get in all the correct variable cost items and add them in for your business with some of our suggestions that are personalized for the lobstering industry that we worked with the Island Institute on. And just to review, what we already had in our variable production and sales cost is we had things like bait, crew wages, our dealer commissions, our fuel, our ice and storage. And you can see here on this column on the right that bait accounts for almost 10% of all of our variable costs. Crew wages, another big category, about 30%. And another big category would be fuel. The fuel and bait are almost 20% of those variable costs of our entire business of variable costs. So we also did the same thing for all of our fixed operating costs. We suggest some of them here as well. And so I'll show you all that again. Remember, we had things like our boat interest payment, the co-op fee that we're paying for, our FB insurance, our lobster license, and our owner's salary as well. And so I'm going to go ahead now and remind ourselves what this looks like on our initial profitability analysis for this example here. So we were selling about $450,000 a year, and Profit Decoder tells us that's about $22,000 below break even. And it also tells us the sales that we would need to increase by to hit that break even point. We could see the same thing down here in a chart, and it shows us that sales gap, the amount that we would need to increase our sales by to ultimately hit break even, that additional $22,000 in sales that we would need. And then it also gives us a cost analysis broken down into those two cost categories that Jay's been talking about, variable cost and fixed cost. And so you can see here, bait is in our top three categories here. And then it also gives us our contribution, that amount that we pay down our variable cost for, and that what goes down to pay our fixed cost. And we could see our loss here of about $10,000 a year. So what I want to look at directly here, and we see this question all the time, it's like, how do I know on a given day if it actually makes sense for me to go out or if I'm profitable when I go out? And so one of the really easy ways to look at this is to go to the seasonality section in Profit Decoder, where you can get a daily breakdown of what your break even is each day. So in our business example here, we're operating about 7 months of the year, and we run about 6 days per week. And when we look at that in our break even on a daily basis down below, we see that our break even is about 581 pounds per day. So if we go out and we catch 554 pounds, we haven't broken even for that day. So it's really helpful to think about this. Like if you're going out the day before and things are a little bit light and you're not hitting that break even point, you might think about, well, okay, what if I reduce the number of days that I was going out on the boat? Let's take a look at that right here, down to 5 days. And you can see that you actually start to come much closer to that break-even point right here to where you might be able to start being profitable on those individual days. You could even look at it as half days. Maybe you don't go out for the full day. Put half days in there and see what it would take to become profitable as well. And so this is really helpful for you to be thinking about, like, based on what you're catching the day before, whether the week is looking light or it's looking a little bit heavy, to think about whether it really makes sense to go out for that day. Because when you don't go out, you save on that fuel cost. You save on some of the bait costs. You save on some of your labor costs as well. And so all those become savings for you if you're choosing to go out on those profitable days. So Jay, did you have anything else to add there?
No, I think that's good, Jordan. I wonder if we can take if folks have questions, they can feel free to put those in the chat if the Q&A or the Q&A, they can use the Q&A button to send in questions if that's working.
Great. I'm going to turn it right back over to you.
Great. And it doesn't look like we have any open questions at the moment. So I'm going to keep rolling forward here. In 1 second, I'm going to share my screen with you. And I want to I'm sorry, hold on one second. So let me know. I'm going to play a video here and let me know if you can hear the sound, on it.
We're still waiting for your screen to pop up.
Yeah. So what we want to really talk about now that we've looked at the lobstering when it earns and setting this baseline is really that efficiency matters. Um, so I'm going to show you, this is going to be a 2-minute video, um, and it really highlights um, how small improvements can add up over time. Now, when I was just clicking into to share my screen, there was an issue with the sound. So I'm hoping it still comes through. But if it doesn't, um, it really doesn't matter because you can just watch this. So we're going to go to a Formula One pit and take a look at uh, what is the difference that time makes.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch.
Notice this is painfully slow for 1950. And then watch what happens over the ensuing 60 years.
The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
Now, what I love about that is you see that 67 seconds that they took in the pit crew was seen as super fast in the 1950s, and then based on small improvements over 60 years, you can see where they get it down to just a few seconds. And the whole idea here is that these really small incremental changes add up over time and have a huge impact on efficiency and what you can do. And so, as we talked about, there are these 4 levers that you have, and Jordan discussed, volume and getting out there on the days when it matters. But really, when you look at the growing revenue in terms of lobstering, you have less influence over this because price is so variable. You sort of never know what you're going to encounter until you pull up your traps. But really, you can have a lot of power here to reduce costs and really become more efficient. And one of the things to remember about this is, what is the standard at one point in time, if you're making small improvements, can really reset things. And suddenly you get a whole lot more contribution. And in these big times of uncertainty, this is really in your control. So one of the things I was frankly kind of shocked at when I looked at variable costs um, for our lobster scenario here, is how much of an impact it does have. And the reason this has so much impact is because, variable costs change with every lobster you sell, every time you take your boat out. And so we just looked at, what would be considered a relatively small change, a 5% change in variable costs. And what we found is in the scenario that we did a reduction of 5% could have an incredible 240% increase in your profitability. Likewise, if costs are going up, you can see where if you have a 5% increase, you would actually have a 240% decrease in your profits. Now, the thing that's kind of amazing here is that when you start controlling the variable cost, as I mentioned, this gives you a lot of power. You First of all, you will increase contribution on every product you sell, which means in turn that you're going to pay for those fixed costs with fewer sales. And it could be a case where, where the catch goes down, but you're actually making more money. So as a result, you'll achieve profitability and break even faster. And as we said, these small changes can have a huge difference. And also, when your variable costs are more under control, there are many shocks going on right now and in the industry, and prices are variable, and also with tariffs potentially impacting the cost of gear and fuel and other things, you'll be better positioned to withstand price shocks the more efficient that you are. And so to talk about like, all right, what are some there, we'll look at controlling your variable costs in two different ways. First, I want to go over a few ideas and then show you maybe how these could be applied. Although, I'm a firm believer that you all know your business better than anyone, but maybe this can help reset some ideas. So this first one, is there a faster, more efficient way? And this could be anything from routing, trap hauling, baiting. Is there a way that you can do things faster and more efficient without sacrificing quality? Um, are you looking for new ideas? When was the last time you tried a new setup or a new technique? Could you try, the next week or, next time you go out, something to save time or money? Are there ways that you could impact that? When we've worked with other folks, really taking the time to document and ask why, and just even creating a simple checklist on a piece of paper can really make a difference. And you can start looking at, hey, what are the tasks that are eating up the most amount of time and energy? And then start thinking about, hey, why are they done that way? Um, are your crew members doing things in different ways, and is one maybe better than the other, or faster, or saves time? And then finally, if you set goals or recipes, as they say, and measure, and really start to think about like, wow, how long does a typical haul take, and what are the targets we should set? So, when you look at ways to lower your variable costs, you could think about things like, hey, could I do more efficient routing to save fuel? How am I considering, the timing of the time of the day that you're going out? What are the routes? How are you driving? Um, Jordan talked about, when are the best days to go out? How are you managing your baiting process? And are there opportunities for efficiencies in there? Um, could you create a maintenance checklist to maybe avoid more costly repairs or regular checks on things to do that? And then finally, are you tracking kind of usage of fuel or bait on either a per trap basis to understand, what is it costing you per pound? And, you can make some of those adjustments in Profit Decoder to understand, well, based on what I'm seeing on the field, like, how does that change, um, what how much I need to be getting at the dock. Now I'm going to pass it back over to you, Jordan, to show us, what this would look like and how you can look at variable costs and Profit Decoder.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. And, I think I've never ceased to amaze me just about how such small changes can make a big difference. And what I want to show you all is like how you can actually look at that in your business in a really simple way. And so, we were discussing kind of going out in the days of the week and which days, were profitable to go out. We're going to go over to the profitability plan and take a look at how we can just really quickly model some of those changes on our variable cost to get a sense of what might be possible and what we might need to do to increase our profitability. And so you'll remember when we were looking at our profitability plan, we've just set a goal of $0 just to break even for now for this example. And we know that we're
Hey,
about
Jordan,
£5,000 below where we need to be to start
Jordan,
even.
no,
Yeah.
we're not, just so you know, we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, okay. One sec. Let me do it again. How about now?
Much better. Makes a lot more
All
sense.
right. Thanks, Jay. So we were discussing how we can look at these sort of big changes or really small changes that ultimately have a big impact on our profitability. And so in this profit plan, you can set a profit goal. And so for this one, I've just left it at $0 because our first step is let's just see if we can break even with this example business. And I was talking about earlier how we're about 5,000 pounds short based on our current cost structure to get there. So when Jay was talking about that 5% difference, right, leading to 240% increases or decrease on profitability, let me just show you how you can just with a couple clicks of a button, take a look at that for your business. So if we wanted to look at unfavorable conditions, so that's a 5% increase, you can see that our variable cost went from $2.99 a pound to $3.14 a pound. So if your costs are increasing, like your fuel, and things are trending in this direction, you could be like, all right, like what am I getting, at the dock for the cost per pound? Am I getting $3.14 or more? And if not, I don't know that, it doesn't make sense to go out unless I can really change my variable cost structure. So let's see what it would take then to reduce that variable cost by 5%. Um, let's take a look at that. So we'll knock that down down to 5%. And so we can see here our variable costs are now down to $2.84 a pound, for our hauls. And so we can see what that just did for our profit goal, just reducing those variable costs that we have by 5% allowed our sales to actually increase and for our profit goal to decrease, for the number of pounds we need to hit our break even to decrease, that we can actually just become profitable on a small change of 5% and lowering our costs. And so that's kind of the big picture, but let's kind of get real with these numbers and see what this would actually look like if we go back to our variable cost. So we'll go back to our variable cost here. And remember, we were talking earlier that a big source of those costs, 10% of our bait, and a big source of cost our fuel. And so there are a couple ways that we could think about it. The first is, all right, maybe I could start thinking about how I'm dispersing my bait and get that a little bit more efficient. And so maybe I could take $10,000 off of my bait cost by really drilling down and getting more efficient. And then maybe with some better routing, being a little bit more conscious about when we're even going out to fish based on how much I'm bringing in, maybe we can bring that down by another $5,000 a year. And what I love about this is like a target that you can look at, based on how much you're spending, how much you're spending on bait, how much you're spending on fuel. You could be tracking that. And then we can go back and take a look at our profitability analysis. And we can see right now, just with that 5% change that we made, adjusting our bait, adjusting our fuel, we were ultimately able to, with our current sales, go above and beyond break even and get profitability. And in fact, we're $27,000 above break even because we started to take an axe to those variable costs. And we've gone to now here from a margin of safety to where we're actually bringing home an additional $10,000 in profit. And so with that, I want to turn it back over to Jay, answer any questions that folks have, and we're going to walk you through another example.
Great. And Jordan, before we go back, could you just show folks how did you get to the profit plan? Because we just saw you over there, and so
Yeah,
you were here on the profitability analysis, but
absolutely.
then you jumped to the end. So could you let folks know how you did that?
Absolutely. So up here on the right, we see this choose section, and here are all the sections that you have in Profit Decoder. And so if you want to navigate to any of the sections that you want to work in, you just go ahead and open that up and click there. You can go back and navigate to any section that you want based on what you're trying to do.
Great. Thanks so much, Jordan. And so now here, I'm going to share my screen again with you all. Can you see that presentation okay? So now what I want to do is we've tackled efficiency, and really this last part of what we want to do is look at we looked at the volume with lobstering when it earned. We have talked a little bit about efficiency. And now what I want to do is really look at adjusting traps and fixed costs. And actually, when we do this, we're going to jump back into Profit Decoder, and Jordan is going to show us, how do I think about, adding or decreasing fixed costs? How many more lobsters do you need to catch? And again, I think an important note here is one thing that's really cool with Profit Decoder is that you can make these adjustments and just kind of see what you think, and then from there make some operational plans. So let's go over and take a look at how you can change fixed costs to really make a difference.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah.
So I want to take a look at a couple of examples with this. And so I'm going to be going back to our overall profitability plan. And, a big decision that many folks are facing is, should I get more traps to increase my volume? And one of the things you can do just really quickly in the profit plan is take a look at that by, looking at what an additional 50 traps might cost you. And so, you can go ahead and put those in to your, put those in here to your variable cost. So let's say, we're looking at $2,500 in additional traps. We'll add that in like that. You can see that based on the increase, with increasing our fixed cost buying that gear, we would need to increase the number of pounds by 7% to make up that investment that we just did in those additional traps. And so you should be thinking about, okay, like how much on average am I getting per trap? And is that going to deliver me the additional $7,000 per trap? And so that's one thing that you can do as far as measuring that and looking at that. The other thing that a lot of folks are faced with is, you have a truck, and is that truck reaching the end of its lifespan? Should you buy a new truck? Should you put more maintenance into your old truck? And so what I want to do is go to our fixed cost here and take a look at that truck and see how we might figure out if it makes sense for us to lease a new truck versus keep our older truck and invest more in maintenance to keep the thing running. So you'll remember down here, we had our truck, and we originally paid $45,000, and we got about $9,000 in annual depreciation of it. And then we also got that truck with a loan, and you could see here the interest payment for that truck is about $2,600 a year. And so you got $2,600 a year of interest combined with your $9,000 of annual depreciation. And so maybe, instead of buying a new truck with a lease like we have, or with a loan like we have here, we can delete that and say, you know what, maybe the time's not right to get the new truck, even though I want those new heated steering wheels. And then I want to just put in $5,000 in operating costs for maintenance. And I'll put that in right here on an annual basis. And so let's go ahead and see what that change from going from looking at a leased truck to now just putting more money into our old truck did to our profitability. We'll go over to the profitability analysis, and we could see that we really shrunk that sales gap down to where we really just need to increase sales now by 1%. So now maybe that efficiency question is starting to look a lot more realistic. Or maybe we could even make up the difference by just going out, 1 day less per week on our unprofitable days. And so hopefully you can start to see now how these decisions can be made pretty quickly and modeled out in Profit Decoder to help you become more profitable.
Hey, Jordan, is it possible you could show us, like, let's just say I didn't want to go back into my fixed costs. Is there an easy way to do it on the profitability plan page?
Yeah, definitely. So if I go over now to the profitability and you wanted to explore the difference here, you can always just take this whole number right here that represents the entire sum of your fixed cost and adjust it right here. And so you could even just look at it on kind of a big picture basis without even having an idea of what fixed cost you want to increase or decrease and start playing around with it here and say, oh, wow, if I decrease my fixed cost by 2.6%, looks like I'm going to be able to hit break even and start to become profitable.
Right. So really, as you can see it, you could start playing around with the different components here to just see where you need to go. Or if you said, like, wow, my, fuel cost is going up, or what happens if my variable costs go up? What is the minimum amount I need at the dock? Or you could say, like, wow, what if I need to adjust fixed costs by a few $1,000s because of an unexpected expense? You can kind of get an idea of where those things fall. Um, so I want to pause for a minute here and just see if there are any questions out there from folks based on what they've seen, and then before we go back in and and conclude here.
Jay and Jason, it does make me think, at least in the current economic climate, about loss mitigation, and that you can also run scenarios around what if the price decreases, or what if, you can map out different negative scenarios as well as positive scenarios to understand what it might be like if XYZ happens, which can be important for planning.
Absolutely. You could, as Jordan showed in the beginning, you could create, three scenarios really easy. Like, one if the price goes to $6, one if the price, comes down to like $4 or below, and you could get a sense of, like, wow, if the price is $4 based on these current amounts that I'm paying for, for all of my costs, like, what does that mean for me? Because that's something I can afford to even go out and see. So you can definitely do scenario planning, and one of the advantages of that, we think, is, then you can be ready for a problem before it happens. And so, that you can have and that knowledge is really power, and then lets you, make informed decisions as you go forward. Jordan, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers it.
Yeah, and if folks have questions you'd like to pop in the Q&A, that's great. I'd be happy to answer anything about how to use Profit Decoder or what you can do, uh, in these in terms of variable or fixed costs or volume or anything like that. One thing that we're going to do after this presentation, you'll get a link not only to where you can give us some feedback and get your free version of Profit Decoder, but we'll send a link to a kind of a checklist to help you think about those variable costs that we reviewed here.
I was also thinking about, while you were presenting about variable costs, about used product deals. Maybe you're driving around your community and see that somebody's selling some parts or something that you may need, used traps, whatever it may be, and you see a deal in, I think of like Uncle Henry's, like you see something listed as a deal, and that's a variable cost for, the spontaneous sales you might see.
Yeah, and depending on what it was, you could put it in as either a fixed cost or a variable cost, and then see, what would be the impact of that just like Jordan did to evaluate, buying a new set of traps. If you were buying a used set of traps, you could do that and say like, hey, how many more pounds do I need to catch in order to make this worthwhile?
Mm-hmm.
So, are there any other questions out there from the folks on the webinar? Um, if not, I may share my screen again, or if Jeff, if you had other questions or comments.
No, please go ahead.
All right. So here I'm gonna share my screen again, and um, all right. So and really just to review what we've gone over here. So as I said before, the previous webinar we did, we looked at this whole business evaluation, and Jordan went over a little bit of that in the intro. But we really looked at like how do you think about and evaluate those daily operations, making sure that you're going out when it's worthwhile, and you're getting enough money at the dock. And then we looked at the variable costs, which, I think you have a ton of power in that. And the more those costs are under control and the more that you can slowly bring in efficiencies, the greater the impact it has on your business. Because it really does matter, even if it's just a 1 or 2% improvement or going out on the right days can flip you from being in a loss to being profitable. And then finally, you can look at those fixed costs um, and really go forward from there. So those are some things you can look at. The other important thing here is, this is really something we see as the start of this. You can enter and keep revising your numbers, and as Jordan showed you, it can be just a click of a button to something more involved, depending on what you're trying to evaluate. But Profit Decoder makes it really easy for you to do that. Um, without having to do really any complicated math or spreadsheets. We do all that for you in the background. You also can reach out to us. My email is j@profitdecoder.com, and Jordan's email is jordan@profitdecoder.com if you have questions. Um, there are also consulting services if you wanted some coaching to help you think about different issues. And then it's really important just to keep it up to date and track the progress. Um, and then, so for our next course, we're going to be talking about diversifying your income. And in that course, we're going to show you how do you build a business from the ground up. So let's say if you or someone in your family has a side hustle that they'd like to make a full-time venture, or if you um, are just thinking about doing something, we will go over kind of two different ways that you can enter in a new business to get a sense of like, wow, how much do I have to sell to become profitable? And what are those levels to understand, what could be some really good ways for you to diversify your income. So I'll just pause and see if Jeff or Jordan, if either of you have any other questions or comments. And thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in today.
Jay, thank you. I think I just wanted to add one other thing, which is you can definitely please feel free to email us. You can also in Profit Decoder at any time, if you have a question about something that you're in, you can scroll over here on the left-hand side and click the help button.
Hang
Where
on for 1 second, Jordan. I just want people to be able to take a look at that so you can share your screen.
All right. So if you need help in the app at any time, you can go to the left-hand side here and click the help button and just send us a message. And so, it could be, is this a variable cost? Maybe you're confused about it. Put it in here, drop it in, put a screenshot if you want, and we'll get right back to you.
Great. Thank you. And then I want to just go back to the presentation for a moment here. And um, you see that okay?
Yeah.
So, thank you all for tuning in. As well, here is a QR code right here that you can scan to get your free account. Island Institute will also be sending out a survey to see how we did. So please let us know. We do take a look at that stuff, but you can scan that and give some feedback and get your free account. So thank you everybody for tuning in today. We really appreciate you being here. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Jeff.
Thank you so much. This is a nice growth on top of the first webinar, expanding a bit in that direction. I'm really excited to come back at the next webinar and look into diversifying income. Going to do a little thinking about that, different scenarios I might want to ask you about. So thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.